Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in today. This is your host, Erin Bradley. And if it's your first time here, you're in for a great show with my friend Daniel Del Real. And if it's OG here, been listening for a while, buckle up because this may be one of the best interviews to date. I'm super excited to introduce you to Daniel. And he's got quite a story for you, and I'll let him share the most of it. But I know him through GoBundance, which is an incredible organization of entrepreneurs, freedom seekers, healthy, wealthy, abundant human beings on a mission to bring contribution and impact to the world. And I get to meet some incredible people. So it was a real honor to meet Daniel at the Real Estate Rockstars conference not too long ago. And he's a first generation American. He's a team leader of Del Real Group in California. He's been in real estate over 20 years and he's done it all and led his team to number one in his area. And he's also the leader of the 7 to 8 show on GoBundance, where he helps real estate and entrepreneurs of all kinds scale from a million to 10 million in net worth. So lots to unpack here, and we'll try to jam it all into an action-packed 30 to 40 minutes here. So with no further ado, Daniel, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm grateful for your time.
Hey, there's some pressure there. All right, let's do this.
Yeah, so we always start from the beginning. I know you've got quite a story, having been in the military, coming from
Yeah.
an immigrant family. Give us a little bit of backstory and how you found your way into this journey that you've been on.
Yeah, I think Ed Milet says it best. I think life just happens for you, right? But yeah, I was product of an immigrant dad and mom. They got their citizenship in '98. I enlisted for the military as well as my brother. I enlisted in '99. He enlisted in 2003 when we were in or 2001 when we were going to war with Iraq. But I got a privilege of sitting in the front row of an immigrant mindset where my dad would say, Daniel, you don't see payment, you see opportunity. And I saw him hustle and work two jobs, and my mom start up, a cleaning business and cleaning carpets, and I'd be out there with them. And my dad never made more than $47,000 a year, and raised, 5 kids. And I saw him and my mom buy a property every 3 years, right? And small little properties. So we spent the summers working on the rentals. We got to listen to my parents struggle with some of the rentals. And my parents didn't really know English, and I didn't learn English until I was about 10. But I remember even when I was in high school, sitting at some of the signings with my parents to help them translate. So real estate was always like in my genes. Now my parents set us up with a clear foundation and really like calibrated us to say, like, it doesn't matter what society wants you to do. Like, you run on your own frequency, and success is different for every people. They moved us into a nice neighborhood, like I would say, um, a very high blue collar neighborhood, and we were the fly in milk, the only Mexican kids. And you know everybody else is either business owner or school teacher, physician. But thinking back, my dad took that risk uneducated to put us and change our environment, moved us from Story and King in San Jose, which is the ghetto, right? Um, Very hard in the Hispanic gang culture, where we had a couple cousins that ended up in prison. They moved us here, and we all ended up, building businesses. But I saw my dad deny himself a lot. He drove a 1987 pickup truck or mid 80s pickup truck, while all the other neighbors had the brand new 1998, 99 Hummers and the boats and the RVs. And he would do their yards, and the neighbors would say, "How's your dad doing? Is everything okay?" And I'm like, my dad was great. Like, he would buy rentals. His vision was so big, he quieted all the noise and the pressure that everybody else thought to, like, keep up with the Jones. And I got to see that. I got to see them get the citizenship. It was such a celebration for us. And I'm like, I'm signing up for the military. My mom was like, okay, I know that you're proud for the country, but don't do it. And my 18th birthday, I was swearing into the Air Force as a military police officer. Got my degree in the Air Force as a police officer, and came home. And my mom had her broker come and visit with me intentionally, just to kind of talk to me. Pulled up in this beautiful SL 500. This is 2003, and might have been a 99 or a 2000. And he's like, Daniel, I know you have an academy start date, a Santa Clara PD date. PD, it was like 6 months from that date. And he's like, why don't you give real estate a shot to see what you could do? And at that point, I remember Hollywood Undercover was out with Harrison Ford, where he's kicking down doors, negotiating contracts. I'm like, yeah, let me give it a shot. And then 20 years later, I'm here, right? I built the number one team in the state of California for like 3, 4 years in a row. It's this business. It's a servant's business, right? You're just serving people and you get rewarded and financially on the level of service you provide to people. It's allowed us to build financial freedom, right? It's allowed me to get into groups like Abundance and then serve them at that level. Um, and so it's been a really cool journey so far. I'm 43. I'm going to turn 44 in a couple days. I have 3 kids, married to my wife Andrea for 18 years. We've been together for 22. So she's definitely been with me since the beginning and has seen, that you hear this phrase that, you look back and it's been a 20-year+ career in real estate and you see this, blazed trail of blood, sweat, and tears. And traditionally, they're not yours; they're your family's, right? Because they're on the journey with you, building this extraordinary life, just like my mom was when she left the country to build a better life for us here. Just like, we sacrificed our summers to go work on rentals with my dad or go clean houses with my mom or things like that. It's definitely a family journey when you're building wealth. And now I have the privilege to sit and talk to you about this stuff. So it's really fun. And like you said, I have we've for 5 years we've hosted the show called 728 and Go Abundance. Go Abundance is a group of entrepreneurs. You got a men's and women's division where it gives you the opportunity to change your feedback loop. Traditionally, like for me, yeah, okay, I have employees, I have multiple businesses, and my feedback loop sometimes um, is downwards. But you step into a room like Abundance, and now your feedback loop is up. People that have been there, done that, and we're a space where you can actually be vulnerable and share what struggles you might have, even though other people might think you have it all made. But there's a lot of pressure that comes down to having and maintaining wealth. That David Osborne, one of the founders of Abundance, wrote the book called Wealth Can't Wait. And when you look at that, I remember telling him, I'm like, the wait word is so important. Like it can't wait, and it's worth the wait, but it also has a weight associated with it when it comes down to the responsibility to the economy, the ecosystem you build around yourself. As you have employees, you have assets, you have businesses that now rely on you being well-centered, having a good moral compass, being a great father, being physically fit, being mentally fit, so you could be a good steward of that business. So there's a weight to it. So we've been doing a show at Abundance called the 728, the Hunt to 8 Figures, as we're interviewing a lot of men and females that have achieved an 8 figure net worth, which is about a 10 million net worth. The reason why we said 7 to 8 is because at 10 million, you start defying gravity a little bit. Just like when you're in an airplane and you're up 10,000 feet and they allow you to take your seatbelt off. With wealth, it's the same way. A lot of entrepreneurs that are in abundance, it might be worth 2 to 4 million, and they got this look of desperation on their face, saying, "Look, I thought when I became a millionaire, things would be easy. It's actually a lot harder. Like the weight of wealth is heavy because you're carrying it all." But once you start getting into that 8 figure mark, the 10 million mark, you start being able to build pillars around you to be able to sustain that wealth. And so the show is based for them so they could stay patiently disciplined in what they're doing, um, so they could get to that 8 figure mark. Because whenever people have that feeling, they tend to run away from something instead of running towards something, and they start getting distracted with other things because they don't like that feeling of what that wealth is giving them. They thought, hey, look, I thought I'd be worth 3 million bucks. My life would be awesome. I'd have the $1 million house and the boat and all the cars. And it's reality. It's not the case, right? And so we formed a show to really speak to them and get into stories from people that are worth 10 million up to, I mean, we interviewed Richard Branson, which is worth a few $1 billion, I think 3 to 5 billion. Because we found like even the interview we're gonna have this month with Daniel Casey, he's worth 12 million. He still tastes the blood of the fight, right? So we're gonna get the story from him, so that way the listener can say, okay, I am here in his trajectory, and I can have a little bit of patience with my journey, and then also show you that the journey isn't like this. It's a curve of straight mastery, and then you see this uptick once you start getting that relationship and the financial capital that compounds. Sometimes we don't have the patience to wait for that mastery to happen, and then the investment or the decision or the relationship that you make that changes your life forever, which is once you start seeing that snowball effect. So anyways, it's been a huge joy, and I've been part of GoBundance for over a decade now. One of the OGs, and I serve on their executive board, which is a huge honor for me, being part of, the organization going from, a little less than 1,000 members now to hopefully in the next 5 years, 10,000 members.
Amazing. Okay, there are so many things to unpack here. I think I want to start with something you said about your dad and when he moved you into that neighborhood and into a new environment. And when I think about what you've gone on to create in your life and your involvement in GoBundance, but also your ability to have multiple businesses, to be passionate about your role as a husband and a father, to take life's epic adventures, so much I imagine of your journey has been influenced by the environment you choose to put yourself in. And one of the questions I have for you is, at what point did you start to recognize the importance of investing in yourself? Because I know, like, when I was early on in my career and I was solopreneur,
Mhm.
and I kept on hitting my own personal capacity and burning out and running on fumes. And I didn't have an environment that was supportive of expansion beyond my personal capacity. And I had to learn to invest in myself, to hire the coaches, to join communities like Abundance. So what did
Yeah.
that look like for you? Let's start there, and then I've got a couple other questions.
I think well, the first big check that I wrote for my education was at a success seminar in 2005, like 20 years ago. I was 23 years old. I had 30,000 in the bank. I thought I was rich because I had some sales and I was saving money. And I cut a check for like 13 grand for a course. And it was a big check. And I remember looking at my brother. And at that point, I would take my brother with me to things because, he was in college and I wanted him to join the real estate team with me. And he was like 19 and he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." And I ended up investing in myself, and that changed everything for me because it got me into like the growth mindset part of it. But it's the community that you're part of. Aaron West is one of my co-hosts with the 728 show. He's been part of GoBundance for the same amount of time. I invited him to GoBundance, my first event, and he came with me. He invited me to the success seminar. Like he wouldn't. So the importance of having a person that is willing to go with you to certain things. Like for me, it was Erin and I. We did this for a long time where we would go to conferences, and my wife and his wife would have this joke saying, "You guys have shared more hotel rooms together than you have with us." So that was an important part, and that was the biggest investment that I made in myself at that time. But you know, when then 2014, when I joined GoBundance and I met David and Tim and Pat, and we actually went to and joined the group. That's when everything changed for me. I remember sitting at a table and all these guys were making more than I would even imagine being able to make. And I'm like, well, they're no different than I am. And they, in a way, I had to borrow their faith, right?
Mhm.
Borrow their blueprint. Something that I thought was not possible because remember, I was in my eyes, even then, I was a big fish in a little pond here. Like, so I dare myself think of a bigger vision when I'm already doing really well. But these guys really allowed me to borrow their faith and borrow their blueprint to see what's possible. So your environment, in my opinion, they say your net worth is your net worth is your network. And that is 100% true when it comes down to my growth whenever I joined a group like this, and then what I've been able to accomplish over the last even 10 years with them.
Okay, so I love that you talked about this. When I think a lot of us can relate to this feeling of, how dare I think of a bigger vision? Everything's fine. Look, I've done great. Why would I sacrifice more? Did you have any times, I suppose you probably did, that you could share, of struggle or self-doubt, or even like the two steps forward, one step back, that makes you second guess
Mhm.
everything?
Yeah, I think we go through them all the time. So I always talk about the four C's of growth, and I think in life you have to go through these. And this is one of Dan Sullivan's teachings, where number one, you have to commit to this bigger vision. Number two, you have to earn courage, which means you have to step into fear. You have to be afraid, right? But once you do that, then you learn what you're capable of. If you learn what you're capable of, you're like, okay, what's my mastery here? What's my capacity? How much can I do here? And then you have a choice to, once you get there, to wear it like a warm sweater for the rest of your life or go chasing those four C's again. Like you're very clear on what the next commitment, go chase courage, get courage, step into fear, learn what you're capable of your capacity. And I felt like in my business, I've had to do that every 3 to 5 years. And I'm 3 years into that process right now when I removed myself from production. And now you're like, okay, am I capable of being able to run a team without sitting at dining room tables? Can I scale the business and make it bigger? I have to step into a different role, learn what my new capability is and what my new capacity is there. So, like even now, I feel like I'm taking a step back to take 3 steps forward in the future, but I'm constantly chasing fear, just to make sure that my growth is not it's not gonna stop. But I would tell myself, and I think in a way, I built my wealth and my business out of scarcity and fear. I always thought that like there's no way that this can continue, right? And so I would save literally, I think it was I lived on a salary with my wife and I, it was $6,700 a month. And so it ends up being like 110,000 a year. And we lived on that salary for 10 years because I'm like, I need to know that I know I need to know what I need to live on, but at the same time, how much passive horizontal income I would need to be able to support my lifestyle, and I want to be able to save the rest of it. So, because if tomorrow the market ends, remember when I started, the crash happened in 2007 and 8, right? And then again we experienced COVID. Then even 2019, you're talking about a recession, and now we're dealing with another one now. Like I experienced that, so I'm like, man, like this could end tomorrow. So I kept investing like 70, 80% of my income for a long period of time. And that discipline and the consistency of me doing that and constantly buying property or investing in bigger properties, um, it created this big whirlwind of momentum and passive income and capital events that around 2017 and 18, I didn't have, I couldn't tell myself that lie anymore, right? That like, I'm not going to be okay because I created financial freedom, and at the same time, the business was doing really well. So I feel like I deal with that. I dealt with that for the first really 14 years of my career, where I kept trying new things and saying, "Okay, it doesn't work, it does work." And I'm actually going through that right now. You know, stepping out of production and seeing what the team can do without me in sales. And yeah, we've taken a slight step back in production, and I got to be able to sit in that fear to say, "Okay, how is this going to shake out?" It shapes me more as a leader. Um, it really gives me form of mastery in the patience and the plan and the vision. And that's something that I'm learning right now.
So, what kind of advice do you give to somebody who's been in real estate in this recent market where external circumstances have potentially dealt a blow to their
Yeah.
production? Because one of the things we've been talking about a lot on the show lately is just how what is the difference between those who have been thriving in recent years? Because many people are, and they've been on this show talking about how, they started to see a blip or a downturn and they said, not on my watch, basically, and like turned their ship around and had their best year ever in 2023 or 2024, or they're on their track for their best year now. Like there are people that are finding success in this market. And it's really hard when you're overwhelmed by uncertainty and the news and where things could go wrong and what might fail. So how do you support as a leader those people in your organization or through GoBundance that are feeling the pain and help them believe in the possibility that there's a light out there somewhere?
That's such a good question. You know, I think I've been in the real estate business for 20 plus years. And I've always heard of like, oh, the traditional market, the traditional market. I'm like, I've never seen a traditional market. Like this market is so inconsistent, always has been, right? It's like the only consistent thing about the real estate space is the fact that it's going to be inconsistent, right? There's going to be ups and downs. There's never been an actual normal market in my 20 plus years. It's been crash, it's been recovery, it's been crash, it's been recovery, it's been crash, it's been recovery, and it's never long enough for you to get your footings. The only consistent thing about this real estate industry is how I show up to it. And it's like, how am I showing up to it? And in a market that in an industry that you know is going to be inconsistent, you have to come to it very disciplined and consistent. What we found over the last couple of years is that we've avoided skills. Like this market right now is a skills market, is a high habit, high discipline market. It's the KPI market. Like what you're doing, it matters. Versus the market that we're in, when I have this analogy, I tell my team, it's like if you look up on the tree and you see this bird standing on like sitting on a branch, and it's sitting up there with confidence, does it, you have to ask it, like, does it have its confidence in the branch, or does it have its confidence on its ability to fly? There was a lot of agents on that branch. The branch broke. They fell to their death because they didn't know how to fly. They didn't have the skills. This is a skills market. You have to know the skills and not have the confidence in the branch, the market. You have to have the confidence in your skills. And the beauty is once in this skills market, if you step in very consistently and you learn how to fly, you realize that branch is high and I could see a lot, but knowing how to fly, I could get to a higher branch and have a different horizon, and a different world opens up to me. You unlock a different level. And so that was the market we just got out of. We got out of a market with a bunch of fat birds on branches. The branch broke and they realized they didn't know how to fly. Now, it's a skills market, the same skills that we had to learn when we started the business of if it's a contact game, it's a contact sports, it's a rejection game, it's knowing your numbers, treating this business like a business. There's so many people that want to be self-employed, and really they think, oh, I want to have time freedom. No, it's actually the other way around. You exchange your 9 to 5 for a 5 to 9. You don't have one boss, you have 30, 40 bosses because you work for a lot of clients. You're in the service industry. There's not really a time that you really shut off. That is just the business that we're really in. But and a person is willing to exchange their time for money, a guaranteed money, like say you're making 100,000 a year or $50 an hour, they will show up and do everything that's required for that job. They will get reprimanded if they don't show up for certain things, if they're late. And in return, they get security, $100,000 job, right? So they give up their freedom for security of that job. An entrepreneur gives up that security for true financial freedom, right? Where you don't have that. But what happens is people are willing to exchange their time for money. When you're in real estate, you're exchanging your time for the hope of money. That is the difficult part for a lot of people. And I see a lot of agents come into the industry and not treat their business like a business. They're willing to exchange their time for money for somebody else's dream. But whenever it comes down to their dream, they're not willing to show up at the same level that they did for exchanging their time to build somebody else's dream and have security. You actually have to show up a lot more intentional with your business because you're building your business, your dream. So whenever we built the team, that's what we understood, that agents are entrepreneurs, not like in a way they think they want to be entrepreneurs, but they need guardrails, like when you're bowling, right? They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be a business partner. They want to be able to have they need accountability. They need structure. But sometimes they're afraid to invest into their business or afraid to build out the systems. They need the mentorship, the guidance. And so when you really look at the agents that are high producing, if you really look at them, even in our market, any agent that say would produce more than 10 million a year in volume, first 47% of agents don't produce anything. And so, but if you really look at, say you want to do and sell 10 million in real estate, there's a 0.5% of agents that do that. So you got to ask yourself, am I doing what the 99.5% are doing, or what is the 0.5% doing that I need to be doing? And if you really look at them, you're like, they're disciplined, they understand KPIs, contacts, they're always chasing fear, they're investing in their business, and they treat it like a business. And if you can't if you can't answer the question of saying, am I doing what the 0.5% is doing? Then you need to go back to the drawing board and really get clarity and give yourself instructions on what it is that you need to do to be able to be at that 0.5%. There's so many people that say they want to sell or help, say 10 million worth of volume in the business world, but their actions don't actually line up with what their intentions are, right? And so
Yeah.
us being very clear on that and then giving yourself very clear instructions. But the only consistent thing about this market, even the stock market, anything, is how you show up to it.
Yep. I mean, I love this so much because you're speaking my love language and you're saying things in like almost verbatim, but in a different way that hopefully gets heard by the audience. If they've been hearing me talk about this, I talk about it all the time. Like when somebody says I might have to go get a job, it's like, what's the expectation of the job?
Right?
Well, consistent income. I'm like, okay, that means you're trusting a boss who has a business plan for profitability to tell you what time to come to work. And as long as you come to work on time and do what's expected of you, you're going to get paid. And then I'm like, would you trust you as the business owner? Like if somebody came to you and said, I want to work for you, would you be able to deliver them a game plan? Do you have a game plan? Do you have a recipe for success? And so it's so interesting because something we talk a lot about on the show in my community, et cetera, is helping agents and lenders and entrepreneurs in general get to a point, be committed to getting to a place where you can rattle off your formula for success, the KPIs, the number of contacts, the hours you work, the time you start, the time you finish, right? And once you have that, you
Yeah.
have become empowered to be able to recreate success, if you will, right? So we have these valleys and we need to know we've got the tools to emerge again and again and again because it's never going to be a straight line.
We
So
call
one
it
of
the
my questions for you and something I asked somebody yesterday was when you think about your journey and you think about those valleys where you have these moments where you just realize enough is enough. I don't want to go on like this anymore. I'm out of alignment. I'm burned out. I'm overwhelmed, whatever. I'm drowning in this. Do you feel like there's an opportunity for listeners or people on your team to learn from the painful experiences that you've had or that I've had in order to get to that place of commitment and determination? Or do you feel like there's almost a necessity for everyone to have their battle wounds, right? Like their badge of honor because they have to wait till they're desperate and broken before they're willing to make a change?
Yeah.
Or do you think people can decide? Like, look at what Daniel's done and say, that's the way I'm going to do it. And I know it may not be a straight line and it may not be easy, but since he's done it, I can do it. And I'm not going to wait until I'm flat on my face. I'm going to start today.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that have communicative knowledge. They listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books. They don't have revealed knowledge. Like it's like you need to go out there and do it. I could read a lot of books about jujitsu. If I don't go out and hit the mat, I'm never going to learn how to do it. I could read all the books and listen to all the podcasts in regards to marathon running or triathlons or Ironman. If I don't go out there and really feel the pain and how I respond and build my endurance, then it's all communicative knowledge right now. And so I always say that, in life, we get exposed to lessons day one, we learn them day two, and we spend our whole life trying to realize them. Even what you said at the beginning, that I've restructured or said similar things, but it just in a different way. It's important for you to stay plugged in because sometimes you're not ready to receive the message, right? We learn the lessons day one, right? We get exposed to them, we learn them day two, and we spend our whole life trying to realize them. And it takes sometimes it's you're at a stage where it actually lands and it stirs in some conviction for you to say, I gotta move. Just like when we talked at the Real Estate Rockstars, the first thing I asked is like, do I have your permission to stir some conviction in your heart, because that's what I needed for them to be able to move, right? I wanted to activate that. And so what gets you through the first part of your question, what gets you through the harder parts is, you go through that part where, all right, people are walking around subconsciously incompetent, just don't know better. Right. And then it gets to a point where you get exposed to these lessons. They listen to your podcast and they become consciously conscious, but they're still incompetent. They got a lot of communicative knowledge, you got no revealed knowledge. When you start doing the work, then you start seeking the consciously competent. Like I'm conscious and I'm competent. I'm walking forward, right? And then what gets you through the hard parts, and when you get the mastery, which is subconsciously competent, you're just now just subconsciously competent. You know those numbers like the back of your hand. You know your KPIs. You know exactly what you need to do. You could teach it to somebody. Like if you get stressed out, you know exactly where your body goes to, your mind goes to. Subconscious competent. That's what gets you through the hard part. The problem is a lot of people will listen to everything that they need to do. And they make a choice to stay consciously incompetent. It'd be nice for them to say, yeah, you could come and listen to everything I'm saying and implement a lot of that. But you just need to implement one or two things and hope to seek consciously competent, right? And as you do that, you start adding more things. Okay, I remember that Erin said this, or Daniel said this, or somebody else said this, and you keep adding things to your conscious competent walk until you get this subconscious competent, because it's compounding effect over a long period of time, and it just becomes part of your DNA. So I think getting exposed to these lessons and listening to us is important, because now you've taken the pill like the Matrix. Now you make the choice whether you decide to stay sleeping, or whether you take a step forward and get uncomfortable, and you chase that courage and step into that fear, and stay disciplined enough with no excuses on the market is shitty, or I always say silencing all the gunshots, right? In the military, when we used to do our training, we'd kick in doors and we'd have to visualize everything. We have to make sure our team is cohesive and they know the plan, and I know what he's going to do, I know what they're going to do. And if the shots start ringing, we'd say that the person that can't silence the gunshot is the one that's going to end up in a body bag, or you're going to get one of your buddies killed. Why? If you need to be able to silence the noise, silence the gunshot, keep moving to the plan you've executed, know that the guy behind you and the guy ahead of you are going to do their thing as well to keep everybody safe. You're going to keep moving forward. But if it freezes you, and then you're like, oh my God, and you drop to the ground, now you're looking, the next bullet's probably going to come to you or your buddy, right? And so silencing the gunshots are important. What's a gunshot? Politics, the stock market, tariffs. It could be COVID, it could be the market, it could be interest rates. Those are all gunshots. Just silence the gunshot. Social media, silence it all. And the way you do that is by having a clear vision and a plan, and having a team around you, that when you do stop accidentally because something is loud, like you're doing something that doesn't align with the plan, they're gonna tell you. It might be like, for us, it could be this woman, or could be this guy that says, Daniel, move, 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 and you snap out of it and you move, right? Because you're like, it doesn't line up with our plan. And so I think that's the thing that affects a lot of people. They're constantly walking around in a state of distraction, and they don't have a clear enough plan, and a good enough tribe to allow the silencing of the gunshots of life. And in return, the body bag comes back with all their hopes and dreams. Right. And that's the scary part. So having clarity of what that looks like, having a good environment, and actually doing some of the things that you're hearing on some of these podcasts, to try to chase your own conscious competence, and eventually get into your subconscious competence, which is mastery.
I love that. I feel I could go on for hours, but I feel like that's a perfect way to wrap this up and tie it in a bow. What a really cool analogy, and so easy to visualize how we allow that noise to interfere with our ability to move through and move beyond when we're feeling stuck. So yeah, thank you. I feel like I've taken pages of notes. That I love this. I love doing the podcast because I learn so much from my guests. They've become things that are ingrained in me from this point forward. And you've said a lot of things today that are now anchored in my world, in my subconscious. So I just really appreciate you coming and sharing your story and your
Appreciate you.
wisdom and your energy. It's been great.
Well, thanks, Aaron. It's fun. It's kind of like, I think that the reason why you've hit a stage where you're consciously competent, right? So we're always looking for validation in a way of like our thought process, right? So that's why when we're in GoBundance, we're like, oh my God, it fills my cup, because these people are speaking my language. Like I thought I was an alien in a world that's strange. You step into this room and you're like, what the heck? All these people are speaking my language. And whenever that happens, you're both, and the group is in the subconscious competence, and then like time stops. You could spend hours talking about your vision, your health, your family, your goals, your plans, like the language of abundance, the language of the entrepreneur lifestyle of, the goal is, I always say like, hey, like we're in this big health kick and we do a lot of cool health stuff. And I tell my wife, like, my goal is not to live a long life. But live. It's not about the amount of years, but the quality of life that I live while I'm here. And I never want to outlive my kids, like my brothers and sisters, my wife. Like, I don't want to be healthy and live a long, like those people says I want to live to 130. What? So you can bury all your family and friends at 100? Like, that's insane kind of life. I'm like, no, I want to live a quality life, and in hopes that it inspires people around me to also live a healthy life and live long with us together, right? Or, we're living a very purposeful and intentional life. That's the power of having these conversations. That's the power of abundance, the power of listening to a podcast like yours. You're trying to find a tribe that is speaking your language.
Well, I think one common theme throughout all of this comes down to choice, right? It's a choice to silence the gunshots. It's a choice to invest in yourself. It's a choice to join the community, to get in the environment so that you don't stay stuck letting your fear determine your reality, because we can't live our lives without fear, without limiting beliefs, without moments of uncertainty. If we're on the leading edge of what's new and exciting for us, we're always on the leading edge of the unfamiliar territory. So I just see so many people that let fear become the excuse for why they stay stuck and unfulfilled, when the only difference between that reality and another reality is the choice, right? I read somewhere there's many realities being lived right now and you're choosing the one you're in. Now, obviously that doesn't apply if some like tragic life event has happened in your life. Maybe you don't feel that you chose that, but in terms of our journeys as entrepreneurs and how we allow the noise to affect us, I think there is a choice for how we can.
So I want to say something about the trauma just because I think it's important. And we've been in the military and being around a lot of PTSD. My brother, very distinguished, very decorated um, Marine, is also a physician, has also given up a lot of that to become a priest and like going through a lot. And he suffers from PTSD. My brother-in-law suffers from PTSD. And one of the things you learn as you're healing from that is trauma doesn't have to be one like an experience. It could, like, entrepreneurs have trauma of 1,000 scars, right? So it could be trauma over a period of time. But if something like that did happen to you, and say you were put into an environment where the environment created trauma, maybe it was a childhood environment, maybe it was a medical issue, maybe it was something like rape. I mean, it's a big deal. You can't control it. I think the difference between people that heal through PTSD and don't are the people that you get the choice, like you said. You choose whether you make that trauma as a resonance or you make it a reference point. And being in real estate, we need to evict ourselves from that trauma and say, I'm no longer going to wear this as a warm sweater and make my residence here. It's now going to be a reference point for me of what was, right? And so I think the people that are able to evict themselves from that, it's a choice. It's a hard choice. You have to open up old wounds and go through the whole healing process, and that's incredibly difficult, but you're making a choice to evict yourself and make it a reference point instead of a resonance. The people that are in the victim mentality, you see them and you'll say they can't move on from something that happened to them in the past, and it ends up being a choice for them to reside in it. And again, it goes back to saying the one thing is you have a choice to take steps forward. You got the choice to open up the wound. You have a choice to actually heal. You have a choice to make it a reference point, not a resonance.
I love that. So good. Awesome. Well, Daniel, if folks want to find you, follow you, get a hold of you, where are all the places they can find you?
Well, I think all the cool kids are on Instagram, so you can find me on Instagram, Daniel Del Real. And the cool thing about being in real estate is I tell my team, I'm not a secret agent, you know.
Yeah.
So you probably Google me and find me on. We have the highest reviewed team in the Valley in California, so I'm pretty easy to find. And if anybody has any questions or about this conversation, just mention Erin and the podcast, and then in an email or text message, and I'll make sure to get back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. This has been extraordinary.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you for having me.
And to all my friends out there, thanks as always for tuning in. If you are finding value in this podcast, please be sure to stop what you're doing and leave that 5-star review, as it helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Daniel and help this content get found so more people can live a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.